All right, folks. Why don't we get started? Welcome everybody. I hope you've had your afternoon coffee. I've been properly caffeinated. I have a little bit of water in me. I got to sit for a while. This will be the last thing of the day, hopefully. So, welcome to the panel discussion. I want to just briefly introduce everybody, and then we'll kick things off. We'll start with Hema. She brings over 22 years of experience. Okay, can we start over?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like 25 years of experience. I wanted to share that, but didn't get a chance.
No worries at all. So she brings that many years of enterprise architecture and data management expertise across healthcare, financial services, energy, and manufacturing. As a distinguished enterprise architect at Schneider Electric, she champions positioning EA as a foundational discipline that drives business value from the start. She focuses on ensuring that the company's data platform standards and procedures are aligned with strategic business objectives. So, Hema, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
We're also joined. Thank you. We're also joined by Kalyan, who combines 15 plus years of consulting experience on major enterprise transformations with 8+ years of dedicated EA work across manufacturing and now media and entertainment. At Warner Brothers Discovery, he's building a modern, outcome-driven EA practice that operates as an enabler and is navigating the complexities of company separation. His expertise lies in managing federated organizations with acquisition-heavy histories while maintaining architectural coherence. So, Kalyan, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Vishal, who brings over 20 years of software engineering and enterprise technology leadership to Broadridge. His practical, implementer-focused perspective addresses a critical challenge: making enterprise architecture relevant and valuable in agile, fast-moving environments where governance is positioned as an enabler rather than a barrier. Vishal leads large-scale engineering and modernization initiatives at Broadridge, focusing on how architecture and engineering practices can co-evolve to deliver business outcomes. Vishal, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me over here, Tony.
Of course. So if any of you folks listening in have any questions, feel free to put them up in the chat. I will try to pepper them in as we kind of sally forth here. Vishal, I think maybe we'll start with you if that's okay. So when we talk about enterprise architecture being a strategic enabler and not a barrier, right? The idea of the Department of No is kind of a common pattern that comes up. How do you position the value of EA in an organization that's focused on moving fast and being agile? I know that a few of the presentations before referred to agile as a bit of a 4-letter word, but in any event, that's an easy shorthand for us to kind of talk about how to frame this, right? So, how do you position that value?
So, in many of my conversations, that's a good question, Tony, to start with, right? Because in many of the conversations that I'm a part of, people are generally asking me, why do I need enterprise architecture in this world? It's more documentation and creating more obstacle than enabling us. So I'll start with a statement that I share with all my team when I'm on the calls with them. I said, you would always have an enterprise architecture. It's on you whether you want to architect it or not.
Right.
That's how it is. So good, bad, ugly, you will always have an enterprise architecture. If you not architect it, it'll be the way you are feeling today. Which side of the bed you're getting up. It's more on the mood than on anything else. So, and lately I've been reading, to your point, right? A lot of posts that enterprise architecture is losing its value because it's becoming an overhead. I do not completely disagree, because historically how enterprise architecture has been growing, it's more on Department of No. It's because we are coming with a stick in the hand. There's no carrot. Saying that you have to do X, Y, Z things, follow the pattern, follow the norm. And we are not doing very important pieces, making the right thing to do and easiest thing to do. If we do that, everyone will follow the practices. It's just that we are coming with the norms without having an idea of how to get it implemented. And as an engineering leader, I did tell one of my enterprise architect once that I wish your presentations would work in my data center. So that's what it is. So if we make engineering a part of architecture group, making sure the right thing is the easiest thing to do, people will start respecting enterprise architecture. People will start absorbing the practices, and then it becomes a standard to follow. We are doing very similar thing in Broadridge as well, when we are promoting an enterprise platform that can be repurposed, reused by all the different products that we are building and providing it to our clients.
Right. So just making it more digestible, making it a little bit easier for them to kind of comprehend. So storytelling comes up a lot when we talk about just trying to establish yourselves as an enabler rather than a barrier. So Hema, Kalyan, feel free to jump in, but I'm trying to get a sense of like how do you feel like EA practices can accelerate that kind of adoption when we're talking about digital transformation. So in other words, there's a widespread project in the organization, right? And there's many facets to it, and of course, change management's a huge part of that, right? Just getting the adoption to the stakeholders. So how does EA kind of fit the mold in terms of communicating that effectively to everyone?
So I can go and share an example of what we are doing in Schneider Electric. To what Vishal was saying, it in in the past years, it has been EA as an organization has been a blocker because we've been kind of a police telling them what they should be doing and
Right.
enforcing the laws and policies, right? So now we have actually shifted the game, and we're telling our businesses and the people that we work with, saying, hey, we're here as a traffic light for you. We'll give you the red, green, and orange signals for you to go, and we will ensure that you have the right driver's license to drive on the road, so that you don't get into accidents or any other things, right? We're not the police, but we are the traffic lights, right? And so what we also did was, and after changing that mindset, we said, okay, what are the business capabilities that we have within the organization? And we, for a critical program that we have, we are going through a huge ERP transformation. So we mapped that ERP transformation to the business capabilities that we have within the
Mhm.
organization, and then have gone ahead and said, okay, which of these business capabilities are being impacted as part of this transformation? And so the users at the end of it, at the end of that value chain, will be impacted because of that capability map and the applications that are within those capabilities, right? So we've gone down that path, and we've shown the value of EA through mapping the capabilities to the applications, to the processes, for any large transformation. It's a journey. It's
Of course,
starting
yeah.
to show its value, but I feel it's a mind shift change that we have actually had within Schneider Electric by adopting that kind of principle.
I like the idea of being the traffic light as opposed to the traffic cop in that sense, right? Just kind of setting the limits. I'm immediately reminded of yield signs. Just don't as I'm glad you didn't use yield signs in the metaphor because nobody seems to know how to use them anymore.
Exactly.
Kalyan, I think you have a unique perspective on this because, as I understand it, your organization, you're operating without kind of a traditional ARB, so you really don't have that layer necessarily of I wouldn't necessarily say that ARB is considered to be that traffic cop, but definitely that's a layer there where there's the concept of getting approval, making sure that things make sense from a standards and practices standpoint. So I'm curious. I'm curious how the pull model works at Warner Brothers Discovery, and how you kind of navigate that federated landscape, right? Because you're dealing with a lot of companies under the same umbrella. If I'm reading the trades right.
Yeah, definitely, it is a complex environment here. Coming to the analogy that Hema made, like a GPS, we are helping them providing directions which way to go, and at the same time, strategic versus tactical, we help in both sides so that the business as well as the other towers get value out of the enterprise architecture team by providing assistance where needed and being that lens that shows the current state as well as all the business capabilities out there and where all we can adjust and steer towards the right direction.
That makes a lot of sense. So can obviously I'm not asking for any kind of trade secrets or anything, but do you have an example of something in mind recently where, you had that, just like a recent example of something where, if there was a traditional ARB in place that might have been a little bit more restrictive than what the current model is that you guys are running?
Yeah, I mean, for example, when we decided to do a POV of a specific business process, tooling versus adding the value by just evaluating bunch of tools, and rather than us trying to stop and ask why do we need this additional tooling and why do we need this, we try to understand the business pain points, and that way we are not blocking completely, at the same time assisting them in doing the POVs and POCs together with them.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I'm just having an issue here with my screen. Bear with me for a moment. All right, very cool. Yeah. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to pop in. Otherwise, I can keep going. I have a few more here. Vishal, I'm curious because
If I can add on that ARB question, Tony.
Yeah, go for it, please.
ARB, just for everyone's benefit, it's the architecture review board that the enterprise architects run at the enterprise level, with all the domains and all the other architects coming together, presenting the different architectures, the pros and cons, and the recommendations, right? From my perspective, an ARB is important, but in some other cases, when there are individual decision boards at the project level, program level, and at every, say, data or supply chain, or those at the domain level, I think ARB, the question of why we need an ARB always comes in. That is something we are revisiting in Schneider Electric as well, and understand the purpose of what is it that we are getting out of this ARB when all those decisions have already been made at the lower levels, right, at the other decision boards. So something for everyone to think about, and what the purpose of having an ARB is. I don't have an answer right now, but I'm just sharing it here with experts so that we can think about the purpose.
And Hema, that's interesting because I've heard in different forums, and when participating in ARB, and when I was leading one of those in my previous life, it's always tell people architecture EA specifically are the visionaries. So that's where I think ARB is important. You have to take your architecture vision to some place, and it has to follow the enterprise business drivers. That's where I think there is enterprises shouldn't get away or evict ARB. It's just that how do we make it leaner, right? And that's where it becomes important for enterprise, for engineering leaders and engineering people to come to ARB as an enabler. That okay, we'll go to ARB with a problem, we'll get it resolved. See where the industry is going, because the delivery teams are so busy doing their job with the blinders on, they don't know what's going on in the industry, and that perhaps is an obligation on architecture board or architects, in this case enterprise architect, to bring that outside in view to the enterprise, that this is what's going on, this is what is going on in future, and this is where the industry is evolving. For me it's financial services, for others could be different domains, but we collectively have to understand this and bring it back to the enterprise, because that, I think, as an architect, is an obligation to the firm.
And I think
I'm a believer of having that ARB out there.
right. And I think like making sure that you as an enterprise architect, or you as a kind of a solution architect, whatever you want to call it, you kind of have to be there before the technology decision gets made, right? Like so having this is something that we talked about in our session, Christine and I, this morning, where we were talking about having a seat at the table. It's very easy for folks at a senior level or a C-suite level to have the mindset of an enterprise architect being the mapper of the current state, the keeper of the current state, and not really having a seat at the table when it comes to the transformations that are occurring throughout the organization. Now, maybe at an enterprise level, it's a more formal understanding, but for smaller, medium-sized businesses, EA could be there's just this kind of smattering of functions that happens amongst different departments and different users. I'm curious, Vishal, like from your experience, do you have any like practical examples of how how you can make the ARB a little bit leaner and be that kind of force before a decision gets made, right? So, like, in other words, do we have any ideas practically, or do you have any experience with making sure that the ARB is really an enabler as a fixed part of the process, as opposed to just this kind of thing that happens in a vacuum while the decisions are really being made?
So yes, Tony, we do have. I'll share one of the experiences. When I was working with JP Morgan, we were in the bank. We were using architecture as a code. That makes it easier for us to govern it. And as Hema was saying, right, putting the lights on. So we made the enabling part of it it's way simpler. We had architecture as a code. We had our architecture patterns well documented that are implementable. And then we documented it, we maintained the directory of it, and then it becomes easier for users when they're coming in with a specific problem to solve it and to add it to that backlog and to add to that dictionary or to the existing ledger of the solutions that we have. So with that, it becomes easier for us to follow the standards, to govern without impacting the productivity of the engineering teams. So that's where I always believe and always tell people, right? It's a Goldilocks concept. Not very heavy-handed, not very soft. We cannot leave it to be a wild west as well. Otherwise, every team would be doing their own thing. Right hand would not be talking to the left hand. It will be very difficult, very chaotic, and an enterprise cannot function like that. So you have to have a
Yeah.
Goldilocks kind of a construct over there.
Right. So we have to have some kind of standard with the development, right? Otherwise, we fall into that kind of we get into territory of like shadow IT, where departments are just making IT decisions independently because they just feel like things aren't moving quickly enough. But at the same time, we have to have a standard in place so that when we put this, when we implement these changes and accept these new applications, etc., that they kind of fit a pattern of a best practice for us, right? So, a phrase that we tend to throw around at ValueBlue is the idea of being an orchestrator of change rather than an architect of change. So, obviously, we have to mention AI at least once, in order for us to maintain audience here. But with the advent of AI, when you have folks who now have, to a certain extent, they have the ability to at least prototype something that they wouldn't have had the ability to even 6 months ago, a year ago. There's going to be more of this mindset of, there is better out there and we really should be exploring it. And then I feel like, from our point of view, so we can't really kind of put the genie back in the bottle in that regard. We have to be an orchestrator of change. So in other words, we have to kind of facilitate, okay, I understand you have this new idea. I understand you have this prototype in place. Let's walk through how this would look in our organization. Let's kind of experiment with this. I'll have to find a case study. I don't have it off the top of my head, but John Deere, of all places, they had a very comprehensive kind of AI implementation where it was really just like they created an idea marketplace for employees to kind of bring new concepts of like automation and concepts of AI infused workflows, and people got to review them from other departments. They got to vote on them basically and kind of experiment with them. So I think there's room, to your point, I think there's room to be in that Goldilocks zone and say, we need to be more agile. We need to find quick wins, but at the same time, maintain a standard so that we don't just kind of destroy the entire infrastructure of our organization or just make it look like this patchwork of very, very strange objects.
And just to add on making ARB leaner, and in my previous workplaces, one of the things that worked is mainly communication. Even before we get to the ARB, technically, everybody and their teams are already well aware of the problem that we are trying to solve. It is more like coming in and making sure that there is not any unknowns that we have missed out, right? So it is faster. Before an executive ARB, there was a technical ARB. And before a technical ARB, we socialize with the team. It is having those relationships with various towers and teams that are involved in making that solution scalable, that has helped.
So I'm curious. Maybe I'll throw this to you, Hema. Like, you have, I've noticed throughout, and in our discussions before the panel today, you have an excellent knack of breaking things down into a analogy that makes sense, right? So we talked about enterprise architects as being town planners previously. You had mentioned, we keep coming back to the idea of the traffic lights and being the traffic signal as opposed to the traffic up. I'm curious, like, aside from that, are there any other ways to make the complexity a little bit more navigable, right? Especially since more people are going to get involved in kind of, things are going to get more agile. People are going to get more involved in the process of transforming the organization. Is there a way for us to kind of break that barrier of the complexity of the language that we're using or the complexity of the structures that we're dealing with, so that they can have a better handle on what a kind of a green path to a transformation looks like in our organization?
Communication, communication, communication. Those are the three words I would actually use. And that's the power of any transformation program to be successful or to break. And for an EA as an enterprise architect as well, to be successful within the organization, right? Again, we should be the people who are willing to work with our peers and with our business leaders in resolving those blockers and challenges that they have by providing guidelines on what are the standards that we have, what are the standard technologies that we can have, and then bringing in perspectives, the outside in perspectives on the industry standards, and then say, okay, hey, this company is, say, Broadridge is doing it this way, or Warner Brothers is doing it this way. Can we consider it given the limitations that we have within our environment? And that's exactly how I go about in my role in bringing that value. um, Even though I over communicate, it's fine. At least they know what is out there, and I have those individual relationships with my stakeholders, one on one, right, not
Right.
in a group. That way it becomes easy to disagree, agree to disagree in a larger forum, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't become a personal, it's my empire, don't come into my empire kind of a discussion. So it's communications and relationship building. And only after that, our technology, our expertise, the architecture, and all of that comes into
Of
play.
course. Yeah, it's
It's
it's funny.
interesting.
The idea of over communicating any of this stuff is just insane to me, because if anything, we're constantly under communicating stuff. It's not
Yes.
somewhere that's easily accessible. And I'm talking about not just like, having it in a certain SharePoint, but not having it accessible to them in terms of the language and their understanding. But
Yes.
then also not communicating where that stuff is, not communicating in the same language as your organization. Vishal, I didn't mean to step on you. I apologize.
No, no, no. It's so interesting because Hema and Kalyan, they talked about communication. Always tell this to people, and probably it's architecture is 33% marketing, 33% art, and 34% engineering. That's how I see it. Without, and it has to be an art. It's an art. It's not just science and technology that you get AI and let's play with it. Let's get it done. You get some kind of a new technology. Let's use it in artistic fashion. Plus, market it. It's very important for architects to be opinionated, not biased, but opinionated, right? To get things done and get it addressed, because opinions are formed with real concrete proofs and experiences. And going back to the question that Tony, you were asking about AI, right? And I really like that metaphor. Genie's out. It is out. Let's accept it.
Yep.
Everyone wants to do that in their own fashion, in their own way. So I very strongly feel, and that's what we have started doing in my current organization, wherein we are trying to put a governance around AI. Because what happens is, if we don't have a common platforms, if we don't have common governance, this AI remains and will always be a disconnected proof of concepts. Always. Major challenges that we're facing with AI, I'm pretty sure every one of us will be experiencing it, is around use cases for AI. People are throwing darts, or throwing the mud on the wall to see what sticks.
Sure.
But creating that visionary view, what are the use cases, knowing the business drivers, so that we can channelize that genie to do one task rather than causing destruction.
No, that makes a lot
So
of sense. Thank you
that
for
is
using mud as the metaphor and keeping it PG for everybody. Appreciate that very much.
so that is truly what we are trying we are doing at Broadridge. We are trying to make sure everything is properly governed, because data is a commodity and we are sitting on a lot of data and we cannot risk it. So
Of
business
course.
continuity
Yeah.
and de-risking the entire process is how our business is executed. We are into regulatory compliance and technology space.
That
So
makes a lot of sense.
it's imperative for us to have that data in place.
Yep. So I'm going to read this comment from Desh. By the way, folks, if you're listening, there's 60 plus years of enterprise architecture experience sitting on the panel here. So feel free to ask any questions, even if it's not germane to what we're talking about right now. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. But just going to read out Desh's, and then Kalyan, let me know if any of this resonates with you. So he's sharing the info about ARB at his workplace. A lot of time, our stakeholder viewed ARB as a bureaucratic red tape. They decided to dismantle the ARB rather, and form a standardization of governance at the product level for the product manager to manage and report the approval to the EA team. So EA provided only consultancy for the product team, which deliver the quicker value than traditional central ARB. So I'm curious, it sounds parallel to what you were talking about earlier about how things are done at Warner Brothers. So I'm just
This is
curious.
the statement that you read out right now. That resonates pretty well with what happened at one of the other places I worked earlier.
Mhm.
Definitely, it was viewed as a red tape. That's why we have to break it down further down, so that by the time there is ARB, there is not much discussion.
Right.
It's mainly making sure that everybody is aware of it at that point, right? So coming back to here, we are a relatively newer organization, enterprise architecture. So we are providing value by partnering, and at the same time, our team is diverse. So everybody has a specialized skill set. We bring in all of it together. We are like hackers, trying to make sure that we provide value at every stage, whether by using a tool or by programming. We wear multiple hats, and we have a hacker mentality. That has helped having a diverse team, which is tagged as enterprise architecture. Everybody brings a different flavor to the table, and ARB was never even thought about, in this current journey that I'm having here.
Right. And I'm curious, and this is to anybody on the panel here, but like in terms of tooling, right? So obviously any of this stuff can be achieved with, I mean, you could throw this all in a spreadsheet and get it done, but I'm just curious what role a particular tool plays in this kind of landscape that we're talking about in this very complex and hybrid environment that we're dealing with.
I mean, having a tool or a dashboard going to one place, so that there is uniformity of what we look at least for the current state, to understand, have a same baseline, that has helped. And also, when we are going with a modern tool, we have better visualizations when compared to the traditional ones or older set of tools out there. Central place, having all the data of the enterprise, current state represented, all the business capabilities, all the applications at one single dashboard or one single pane of glass. Throw the buzzwords there, but yeah, that has helped in that way. If I have to summarize, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so having a particular tool, right? I'm gonna keep it agnostic as to what you're using, whether it's Lean IX or hopefully Blue Dolphin, but you have a tool in place that's giving everybody the same information in the same place, right? Outside of that centralization, and Vishal, Hema, feel free to jump in on this one. But are there any other particular accelerators that the tooling will help with, aside from just kind of having everybody have the same set of eyes on the same set of information?
Absolutely. One use case I can think about is application rationalization. You can actually find out that there are similar technologies or tools or applications that are being used in different parts of the organization, and then you can actually understand what features each one of those tools bring in, and you can map it to what requirements the businesses have, and then consolidate those tools, or remove one of the tools from the equation and rationalize it, right? Based on many factors like cost, efficiency, and adoption, and how many users are actually using it, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the use cases of bringing all your applications like in a centralized location and map it to the relevant capabilities, right? And that's what we are doing in Schneider Electric. And we're building that centralized repository of all of our applications. That's one. Application rationalization. The second is the impact analysis. So if you actually, as part of this application rationalization, you're removing an application from that value chain in that process, then something will break in the process, right? Your customers will not be receiving your products because something in that shipping application is being decommissioned, and nobody knows where the who's going to pick up the deliveries and ship it to our customers, for example, right? So that impact analysis, when an application is removed from that value chain, is a humongous value that this kind of a tool brings in, like Linux and the other tools. And as enterprise architects, we'll have it in our head, and we'll be able to pinpoint and connect the dots and say, hey, if you do this, yes, this will break. But this tool actually gives that seeing is believing kind of a view to our end users and our stakeholders, to show that proof,
Right.
uh, and tell them where that impact is in that value chain. So two powerful use cases in having a tool like that.
Absolutely, and that's all. And Vishal, let me know if this resonates with you. But the idea of being able to not only have that data centralized, but creating relationships between the objects. So, like in other words, not just having your applications in one place, your capabilities in one place, but being able to directly say, these applications are helping us realize these capabilities, and as a result of that, this is a business critical application. This not so much. Um, Being able to establish those relationships in a tool, I think, is hugely helpful and takes us beyond just kind of pivot tables and PowerPoint presentations. A lot of the static information that can get old the second you show it to anybody.
So in my head, these tools, right, they enable us from moving away from a typical static document to a living intelligent system, right?
Yep.
And what I've seen thus far, and what tools have assisted us, is its tool allows me to show the blueprint of an enterprise at any point in time. So this is how my enterprise looks. As if I'm a CIO of an application of an enterprise, blueprint would tell me what my enterprise looks like today. This is my target state. So it has an ability to show as is at point in time, to be, as Hema was saying. If we link it out down to the code, now the tools have capability wherein we can link it down to the code base itself. Link it down to the code. We are able to create that as is picture. We have a to be. What's the delta? How do we make from as is to be? So drawing that roadmap out is what is tool assisting us. And at any point in time, I can go and check what do I have to course correct and change and adopt. What is the impact? So definitely tools are important for any EA practice to make it easier for us to do it. Unless you're just doing this is an Kalyan's point, right? Just doing a check mark on that it's EA passed, document it, put it on the shelf, and we'll come visit it 500 years later. So
Yeah,
if you're not trying to do that, we should definitely plan to use an
Yeah.
EA tool that would definitely assist
that's
teams
a very good
to
point.
collaborate.
That's a very good point. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and again, if anybody has any questions, feel free because I'm running out of them. But why don't we go around the room real quick? I'm just very curious. There are folks. I'm sure there are folks in the audience who are just starting out in their journey, whether they have experience from a previous role or this is one of their first roles as like a straight enterprise architect. I'm wondering, just based on your experience, is there what's the first like practical thing that they can do that's going to be high impact there? Um, Hema, maybe we can start with you if you have any thoughts on that. Like, how do they hit the ground running? Like, what's the first thing that they should be doing?
So since I'm new to Schneider Electric, 1 year old in the company, and that's very relevant to how I embedded myself within the organization. And this is something I can share with anyone who's starting on this EA journey as a new person. Of course, I haven't been new to the EA role, but new to the organization, right?
Right.
The earlier aspect that I touched upon, relationships. Relationships are very, very key in solving any problem, architectural problems or transformation problems or any problems. So, if you need to hit the ground running very quickly, build those relationships and rapports, identify the key stakeholders, who are the decision makers, who are the people who will actually support you in making those decisions. And when you bring in these emerging technologies as some ideas, then you identify who those people are, who will be your supporters, and identify who your detractors will be in the organization. People who are always complaining and sitting on the fence and not doing anything, right? Identify them and talk to them and hear their side of the story, what their pain points are, why they are sitting on the fence or are always in a complaining mode, and see how you can fix some of those problems. Of course, you can't solve for everything, but at least um, understand how you can bring that person onto your side when it comes to making some key decisions at the enterprise level. So, the stakeholder management is very, very key to hit the ground running, and then all your expertise in technologies and understanding the landscape, what technologies we have and it's used, that discovery exercise. So, two important things.
No. Well, it's like you said earlier, communication, right? Nothing breaks a silo like getting in somebody's face and saying, "Hello, what can I do for you?"
Exactly.
So that's two
And
very
that's
important
what they
points.
want to hear. They want to hear a pleasing, approachable person who can listen to their stories. And you may not be able to solve it, but at least you are giving them a listening ear and providing them with methods and approaches on how to solve it.
There was this great show. It was a medical procedural on Fox called New Amsterdam, and the medical director, his whole thing was he would come up to everybody, and his first line to anybody new was, "How can I help?"
Mhm.
And that's the approach that you have to take with this. How can I help? Because again, we're not going to be able to kind of break out of that silo. We're not going to be able to have that seat at the table unless, at the very least, they know who we are and they know that we can help. We mean business here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a terrible analogy, I'm sure, but yeah. So Vishal or Kalyan, what do you think? Like, what's we talked a little bit about communication. What's a high impact, hit the ground running type tip that we can
Yeah.
give folks?
So for me, absolutely agree with what Hema mentioned. Communication and building that relationship. Definitely, anybody or any organization starting their journey in the enterprise architecture, it is a huge thing. It covers the entire enterprise. That's why it is enterprise architecture to start with.
Of
One
course.
thing that I have consistently done again and again is every time while I'm building those relationships, I try to understand the business process and exact before even having those relationships or in parallel, understand the business process so that it is easier to understand and empathize with people when they are coming up with inhibitions or coming up with business problems, right? End of the day, everybody in the organization will be working towards making sure that the business is successful and we are attaining the outcomes that are set by the vision of the company, right? So understanding the business process and having that knowledge helps
Right.
building those relationships, and having those relationships will help you understand the business process better as well. So
No, that's a very good point. That's one of the practical steps that we gave folks in our session this morning, which is like, if you want to reach this level of maturity, you literally have to talk to somebody about this. You literally have to write down the KPIs for the people that the stakeholders that are that you're directly responsible for, that kind of thing. Vishal, anything to add as far as like a practical tip that we can give folks? And then we actually have a question from the chat here. Vishal, I think you're on mute.
So much from technology, right? So I'll just take 30 seconds for this. And I completely agree what Hema and Kalyan just said. In practically, right, yes, talent is utmost importance. And as I said earlier, right, marketing is a part of it. That means you have to be a good communicator with opinionated views, right? But first thing that you have to get from your enterprise is to ensure your EA sponsors provide teeth to the EA team. Otherwise, what I've practically experienced is EA becomes a white noise to the engineering organization. Very practically, again, we all will not maybe will accept it, not accept it, but that's how practically it is played, right? So, how do we get teeth in the organization? One is way that we build. How can I help? Kind of an attitude. The other one
Yep.
is get teeth from the enterprise, saying that we'll build, make life enabling, but it's a bell curve, right? For having a better future, you have to get a pain for some time. So get that buy-in from the sponsors, get the stakeholders bought in, show them the progress what you're doing and the impact that the EA team is making. So how do you define that stakeholder management is critical? Those points, viewpoints are important for our stakeholders to see the impact that you're making and ultimately be an enabling team. That's what practicality is all about EA. We can build as many rules, as many laws, as many things as we want. It'll all just be on PPTs or on slides or on Excel files.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. So, so from Andre here, I think this might be our last question, but it's a good one. It's a chunky one. How do you measure whether the enterprise is becoming simpler or more complex over time, and what leading indicators matter most to you? So, anybody who's interested in jumping in on that one, feel free.
I don't know about the indicators, but I read somewhere like, and I agree with it. Complexity is inevitable, right? But confusion is optional. So by sharing what we know and by articulating the tribal knowledge, capturing it either in a tool or in a process and sharing it across, it becomes a little bit easier. So, everybody starts by aiming towards reducing the complexity, but it is inevitable. If we resolve this complexity, we will run into another complexity down the lane.
I like that a lot. Complexity is inevitable, but confusion is optional. I like that. I'm afraid I'm going to have to steal that, so I apologize in advance. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Hema, Vishal, what do you think? What leading indicators matter most to you in this
That's
question?
actually a very good question, Andre. And I will give the standard cliched response. It depends. It depends on the organization that you are in. For some organizations, having 5,000 plus applications may sound the right thing, but for some other organizations, 5,000 applications are complex and it's too much to manage in terms of run cost, headcount, and the amount of features and capabilities that we have to manage. So these leading indicators are definitely organization driven and what are the organization goals and strategy that's driving the entire enterprise architecture at the end of the day. That's my ending comments.
Makes sense. Vishal, the last word is yours. Go for it.
Uh, just one measure of saying whether the enterprise is becoming complex or it's becoming simpler. What is your change velocity? If your change velocity is becoming, if you're becoming faster time to market, that means your enterprise is becoming simpler. If you're adding more integrations to it, adding more complexity to the system, that means the byproduct would be less velocity and higher time to market. That's the simplest measure. You can have it in different pattern, measure it different ways, but that's one simple measure that I'm able to think about right now, beyond what Kalyan and Emma just said.
No, that's a good one. Folks, I could talk to you guys all day, but unfortunately, my wife has theater tickets and has made it very clear to me that I have to be on time. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all so much, Kalyan, Hema, Vishal. Really appreciate your insight. Really appreciate your time, and thank you for the questions, Desh, Andre. Thank you for your feedback. I'm sure if people want to reach out to you, they can through the platform here and through your email and LinkedIn and whatnot. So. Again, thank you very much. Really appreciate everybody listening in on this, and really appreciate you guys lending your vast experience on this topic.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
talking.
you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having
Take
us
care,
here.
all. Thank you.